With this video, I will show you how to load JSON files as well save JSON files. I'll demonstrate how to save and load files across various platforms, given that different platforms use various formatting for their directories. I'll also show you how to load from your resources and then save to the persistent data path if you want to change the database in any way. Before we begin, go ahead and check out the description of the video just to make sure that there is no important information in case I update it later. And then we can go ahead and start. To begin, we're first going to get the Newton Soft asset. So it's Newton Soft as one word and then JSON. And you're going to see it's a free asset. And I already have it imported, so I'm not going to click this, but go ahead and do that on your side. This is a free asset as well utility outside Unity, so I would not ever expect this to go paid. It's been free for as long as I can remember. And we're going to be using this over the JSON utility built into Unity because this offers more flexibility and it is faster. While you're working on importing that, I'm going to show you a quick demo. I have over here my JSON thingy script with nothing in the vehicle size. I'm going to set it to 1. I'm going to set the make and model to A and then B, and then I'll hit save. I see in my console that it did save. So now I'm going to hit play again to stop, hit play one more time, and then load it. And I see that it indeed loaded what I just put in. And just to show you that it is working, I'm going to change B to C under model, save, and then hit load again. And it doesn't look like it changed, but if I actually zero this out and hit load, you can see that it refreshed the data, and it is pulling this from file. We're going to start by making 2 scripts. I'm going to go ahead and make a new scripts folder just to organize. I already have one made. It's called vehicles. It's really small. Go ahead and make a new script and name yours vehicles as well. This is just going to be our database. And then we're going to make a new script and we'll call it database handler. And this one's going to be an empty new mono behavior. Now I'm going to open up vehicles. Design yours so that it looks like this. You don't actually need the using namespace. So you need to have a public struct vehicle, or it could be a class. Make sure you drop off the mono behavior because this will not be a mono behavior. It is just a normal class or struct. And then add a public string make and model. And be sure you add system.serializable. This is very important if you want to load and save your classes. This must be at the top. Going back to Unity, I'm now going to open up the database handler. First, I need to make a list of my vehicles. So I'm going to do private list vehicle underscore vehicles equals new list vehicle. And this will be my collection of vehicles. And this is what I'll be loading into and saving from. Now I need a couple more variables. I'm going to do private string persistent data path equals string.empty. Now I'm going to do private const string file extension equals @symbol.json. I'm going to do private const string database name, oops, let me capitalize the T there, equals @symbol my garage. If I could spell. There we go. And I'm just going to put some comments in. Extension of the database files, database file name, and then root directory where databases exist outside of resources. So that'll help clarify things for you, so whenever you get to add these in, or if you have to look back at them later, you know what they do. Also, I forgot, I need to make my vehicles a serialized field. So the first thing we're going to do is set the persistent data path. And I'm going to do that under awake. So under awake, I'm going to do set data path. I need to make this as a new method. And this is where we will set the persistent data path variable. Now I'm going to do string path equals application dot persistent data path. And the path should always have some characters, but just in case, we're going to do a check if path.length is less than 1, or I could do string.empty, but I'm going to use less than 1, then return. Next, I want to make sure that the ending slash is on the data path. I like to ensure that it's there, or you can ensure that it's not there. I just think it's easier to add it that way when working with database names. I know I don't have to like check it every time. So by adding it early on, I know that it just works. Bong. Had to make my own sound so I don't get sued for copyright. And to make that check, I'm going to do if path.substring path.length -1 and alt1 char. So I'm basically just grabbing the last char on the persistent data path. If it does not equal path, and it's trying to default to the lowercase 1, but I actually want the path namespace. So I'm going to be using system.io, and the path with a capital P, I will type directory separator char. And actually I need to cast this to a char because this is a char and this is a string. So I'm just going to do char.parse and then wrap that in brackets. So it's char.parse and then the last string of the path length. So then I'm going to copy this line here and then add an or, paste it, and then change the directory separator char to directory separator char. That way it will check for the forward or backslash or whatever it might be. And then if it doesn't exist, then I will just do path plus equals path with a capital P dot directory separator char. Now add it on for us. And sometimes these paths do not exist by default, so we might need to make it. So I'm going to check and make sure that it exists. I'm going to do string directory equals path dot get directory name path, and I'll do if directory dot exist. Oops, looks like it doesn't like that, so let me try change that to a capital D. There we go. Dot exist, and then pass in the directory string. So basically indicating that if this directory for path does not exist, I want to run logic. Now I'm going to attempt to create the directory. So I'll do directory info equals directory dot create directory, and then pass in the directory string again. And if the creation failed, which would be if info.exist or doesn't exist in our case, then debug.log set data path directory creation failed, and then I'm just going to exit the method. Otherwise, we're just going to go down to the bottom and then set the persistent data path to path. And to make sure this is working, I'm just going to do print underscore persistent data path. I'll head back to Unity, where I will open up my console and then hit play, where I should see that pop up as soon as I hit play. Actually, I have to add in a new script here. I'm going to now hit play. Okay, so I see that it did indeed add on the character, and it looks like it added the opposite one. So maybe I want to be using the alt slash by default. So let me go ahead and change that real quick. So I'm just going to change the path directory separator char to alt directory separator char. And don't mind the project name. I actually scrapped this project from something else I was practicing on, and now I'm just using it to show a variety of tutorials. Now I'm just going to add a quick comment. Set the persistent data path field. Alright, I'm going to add two methods now that I know I will need later. It's going to be public void on click load database, and they will be empty for now. Public void on click save database. Then I'm just going to comment it for you guys and gals, and I will do saves the what did I call it? Vehicles list to database, or rather to disk. And under load, I'm going to do loads the vehicles database from disk. And we'll just leave these here for now. Now we have to make two methods. You can combine them into one if you want later, but I'm just going to separate them to make it a little bit easier. We need to make one that will remove the file extension of .json because we have that up here, and we're going to make one that adds it because when you load from the resources you don't include the file extension. However, when you save and you load from disk, you do include the file extension. So let's set those up now. So first one I'm going to do is the remove one. So it'll be private string remove file extension string path. I'm going to add the comments now. Removes the default file extension from path. In order to remove the file extension, we need to check the last characters of the path string. In order to that, we have to make sure that the path is long enough to actually contain the file extension. So I'm going to do if path.length is greater than or equal to file extension.length, then run the logic below, else return path. And now we need to do if path.toLower, so we're going to make it all lowercase to compare. There are other ways to do this, I know, but for this example I'm just going to do it this way. Dot substring path.length minus file extension.length, comma file extension.length equals file extension.toLower, then go ahead and return path.substring 0 path.length minus file extension.length. Now let's talk about what this is doing. Substring will grab out a number of characters from a starting point. So the first entry or argument is a starting point. So I'm going to start at the path length minus the file extension length. So if I have a file, let's say it's called, let's say my directory /file.json. So let's assume, I'm not going to count, but let's assume that this whole thing is 15 characters long. So it's going to go out 15 characters, which will bring it to the very end, and then it's going to subtract the file extension length, which we have it as .json up here. So that's actually 5 characters. So it's going to go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we're going to read out 5 characters using the file extension length. So we're going to get that bit right there, and we're going to say if that equals a file extension to lower, then we're going to return the path starting at the 0 index, and then we're going to go out like we just did before up to the file before the file extension. So now I'm going to add comments. If file extension exists, remove it. File extension doesn't exist, so an else statement, and then just return the path. And just to be thorough, I'm going to add comments here. Path isn't long enough to contain file extension. Alright, so now we need to add the file extension or make a method for it. So I'm going to copy this whole method we just wrote, paste it. I'm going to rename it to add file extension, and then I'm going to add the comments. Add the default file extension to path. So we just need to change a couple things. So we're going to do the same check. If file extension exists, remove it. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to actually leave it because we're adding the file extension. So I'm going to cut this line and then just return path. And if the file extension doesn't exist, then I'm actually going to return path plus file extension. And then down here, path isn't long enough to contain file extension again. I'm going to copy this part right here, and then we're going to return path plus file extension. We're not quite at the part yet where we load and save the database to disk, but we're getting there. We do have a little bit more work for formatting and various directory things first. So let's continue on with that. Now we have to make a method which returns a string after formatting it for the platform's directory structure. So basically we're going to be separating it using the separator char and then piecing it back together. Okay, new method called private string format platform path string path, and then we're going to do if path equals string.empty, and this is just a sanity check. Then debug.log error format platform path is empty, and then return string.empty. Now I'm going to replace the backslash with the forward slash. So I'll do path dot replace. Actually, I need to do path equals path dot replace. Now I'm going to do the literal string, because if you try to do a slash without this, it'll actually throw an error. And then I'm going to do literal string forward slash, and then go ahead and close this off. So that way, if your path is, for example, directory slash file.json, it'll actually change it to directory forward slash file.json. And this is just so we can parse it more easily. Now I'm going to do string converted path. Whoops, let me spell that right. Converted path equals string.empty. This is going to be our new path. You could probably use a string builder if you wanted to optimize a little bit, but I'm just going to keep it as a string for simplicity's sake. And then I'm going to split the path by its directories. So I'm going to do string directories equals path.split. And then I'm going to, again, do the literal string of a forward slash. It actually has to be a char. So I'm going to do char.parse and then wrap this right here. There we go. I want to just point out that you would have to do a lot more checks if you are using the directory separator char. This code assumes that whenever you specify a file within a subdirectory, that you're always going to use a forward or backslash. So keep that in mind. That is a limitation of this code. So let's go ahead and go through each of the directories. So I'm going to do for I and linked. I'm going to do directories.link. Let's scroll down a little bit, and I'll do if directories.length equals 1. So if there is only one directory, I'm going to do converted path equals directories I, which would just be the first index, and now I'm going to break from the loop. Let me add comments here. If only one entry, then set path as first entry. Otherwise, more than one directory is specified, which would be else. Then converted path equals path.combine. Oops, I need a capital P, that's why I did that. Path.combine converted path. So it's going to take the current existing converted path and combine it with directories I. And what path.combine does is it combines the path using the indicator directory char for that platform, whatever it may be. And at the bottom of the for loop, I'm just going to do return converted path, and we should be good to go there. Let me just add some comments at the top. Formats a file path to the current platform. Now we're going to actually write to the disk. So what this will do is it will take the path and the data that's going to go inside that file, or the path where the file will be, and it'll actually write it to disk. And I'm going to call this private void write to file, and string text, which will be the text that's being written into the file, string path, which will be the file path. I'm going to do bool format path equals true, and essentially what this will do right here is if set to true, it will run the path through the format platform path code first. So first, let's do if format path, then path equals format platform path, and then I'm just going to pass in the path. If to format to the platform. And now I need to do a sanity check, which actually I should probably do it above this. So I'll do if path equals string.empty debug.log error write to file path is empty, and I'm just going to return. Now we're going to go ahead and try to write this to disk. And note I said try, so we're going to actually wrap this inside a try statement, and then I'm going to put a catch with the exception printout at the end. If you're not familiar with what this tries to execute a code, and if an error is thrown, it's supposed to go into catch, and then you can do various things here. This doesn't always work right with Unity, so it might just fall through, but I'm just adding it in because that's what I'm used to, and it might actually work in a build. I haven't actually had any issues with these, so here's the hoping. But looks like I need to add a namespace because it's not recognizing an exception, so I'm going to do using system, and I'm going to go onto try, where I will save to disk. Let's do string directory equals path dot get directory name path, and then we're going to do set a comment if the directory doesn't exist, try to create it. And I'm going to do like before, if not directory dot exist directory. Then I'm going to do directory dot create directory, and then pass in directory. Using file stream fs is what I will name it, new file stream, and I'm going to pass in the path. And then I'm going to do file mode dot create, which will create the file if it doesn't exist, or just overwrite it if it does. Using stream writer equals new stream writer fs, which is the file stream, writer dot write text. So we're going to open up the file under the file stream, and we're going to create a writer, and then use that writer to write the text to the file stream, which will be our file in the path. Let's go down to exception and then just add some debug print. So debug.log error write to file. Let's just say save hit an exception of, and then I'm just going to do ex.message. That way you'll have some sort of feedback if this does provide an error. Now keep in mind you can read and write from the resources folder in the Unity editor, but you cannot do it in build. That is why we are using the persistent data path. We are getting close now. We are almost done. Oh, I should probably put a comment here. Writes text to a file path. Something just simple, just so you have an idea what it does. Now we need to make a method which can return the text of a resource file, and we need to write another one which will be similar that will return the text of a file outside the resources folder. And again, this is something you could definitely wrap in one method if you wanted to, but to separate things and basically kind of help you understand what's going on, I'm going to make them different methods. So it's going to be private string return file resource string path. And the first thing I want to do is remove the file extension and also format the path. So I'm going to do path equals remove file extension path, as well path equals format platform path path. So input comments, remove default file extension, and format the path to the platform. These both methods, both of these do sanity checks, so I don't really have to worry about that erroring when they want those messages, but I do want to do a sanity check afterwards because we're modifying it and I want to make sure the path is still good. So if path equals string.empty then debug.log error, return file resource, path is empty. Then I'm just going to return string.empty. Let's go ahead and load the text from the file inside a text asset. So I'm going to do text asset as a type and then name it text asset. And I will do resources dot load path. And keep in mind this path is going to contain the file name without the extension because you cannot include the extension when loading from the resources. And we have to cast to the type. So we're going to do as text asset. Try to load text from file path. And we're going to do a quick null check. If text asset doesn't equal null, meaning if something was found, go ahead and return text asset dot text, else return string dot empty. Up here in the comments, I'm going to do returns string result of a text file from resources. I'm going to copy the method without the comments and then just paste it, and then I'm going to call this new one return file text. And if you remember what I said before, we actually have to make sure the extension exists when we are removing from, or sorry, when we are retrieving from the disk. So let's go ahead and add file extension to the path. I'm going to change remove to add default file extension in the comments. And we're going to keep the format platform path. We're going to keep the sanity check here, except I'm going to fix the message here under the log error. Just change it to text instead of file resource. And then we do have to make some changes down below. We're actually going to get rid of this, and we'll do if not file dot exist, and then we're going to pass in path. We're going to do a log error. Actually, we can, yeah, we'll do a log error. I would say this would be a warning because it's not really a failure, but it doesn't really matter. So return file text path does not exist. And then I'm going to return string.empty. And now I'm going to try and retrieve the text from that file. So again, this is going to be a try statement, again with the catch and the exception. And I'll go ahead and add in the exception error logging now. This will be return file text. Exception occurred during retrieval. I don't know if I'm spelling occurred right. Don't care. It's close enough. Let's see. Exception of plus ex.message. I never claimed to be good at spelling or grammar. I also have to actually return a string.empty because something does have to be returned. And then under the try, I'm just going to do return file.readAllText path. So this will read all of the text and return it as a string in which we are returning as a method. So now I'm going to just add comments to this method. Returns a string result of a text file from the persistent data path. We're getting close now. We are just about done. So now we need to make a new method where we will actually call all the helper methods we made to pull the JSON text and actually put it into our vehicles list. To do that, I will do private list t return database t. So basically we're going to accept a generic type, string path. I will make a new string called persistent path equals underscore persistent data path plus add file extension path. So we're basically taking the file name, adding on the extension, and then appending it to the persistent data path, and then we're storing a local copy of that. Check, see if the file exists. If file.exist persistent path, then we're going to run some logic. Let's fix that real quick. Kind of wonky. There we go. And if it doesn't exist, we're going to try to do something else. What this is going to do is it's first going to check for the file in the persistent path. The file probably wouldn't exist there normally unless you have saved it previously. This is where you could, for example, load a database from resources and then modify it and then save it. And once you save it, it'll actually go to the persistent path, and that's where those changes will reside and take place from there out. So that's why we're checking the persistent path first. And let's go ahead and make another string up top. We're going to call it result, and we're going to set it to string.empty to start. And then if the file exists under the persistent path, then we're going to go ahead and set result to return file text, and it's going to grab it from the persistent path. Otherwise, result is going to be return file resource, and it will be from just the regular path. And I guess we don't really need these brackets here, so let me get rid of this. And let me add some comments. Doesn't exist in persistent path, try to load from resources. So now we just need to take this result text and now load it into the list. Going to do a quick check. If result.length doesn't equal 0, you could also probably use if not string.empty. Then here we will go ahead and set it up and deserialize the text. So we're going to do return Json convert, and you might have an underscore here showing that it doesn't exist. So if you do, you're going to do control period if on Visual Studio, and make sure you add the namespace, which would be newtonsoft.json. Got to go all the way back down. There we go. So JSON convert.deserialize object, and then we're going to do it of type lists t, whatever we specified while passing into the method, and we're going to use the result text, and then we're going to convert it to list. And if this is red, make sure you add the using system.link namespace. Then a quick check, else debug.log error, return database, result text is empty, basically indicating that nothing could be pulled. Then we're going to return a new list t, which will be an empty list. I'm actually going to change this error to a warning. All right. It's showing me that the value assigned to result is never used. That's because I reassign it under the if statement. So I can actually just go ahead and drop off the string.empty. And then I'm going to add some comments or a summary here at the top. It will say returns a database using the file, or let's say returns a database at the file path. That is it for loading the database. I've made previous videos where we've done this in much quicker time, but this one again uses the persistent path, whereas the other one only uses your resources folder. If you're going to be modifying databases, you're going to absolutely need this method. So let's go ahead and work on the saving to JSON. We'll make a private void save to JSON and object save object, which will just be the class that we will pass in that will be serialized, and then string path, which will be where the file will be saved. Doing a sanity check, if path.length equals 0, then just go ahead and return. You could probably add a warning or error message there if you like. I'm going to modify the path to add the extension because it's saving to disk, which means the extension is required. So add file extension path. Let me put a comment here. Add extension to file path if it does not already exist. And now we need to serialize it. So let's do string result equals JSON convert dot serialize object, and we're going to pass in save object, And you have your formatting options. You can do indented where it's actually legible to to us, so it's spaced, tabbed, and whatnot. Or you can do none where it's all just kind of mashed together. None will obviously save file space. If you never intend on opening them up, you might as well just use none. Now we need to make sure that the path does not have a directory formatting indicator on the beginning of it, because if you remember, we put it at the end of the persistent path. So this is why I said earlier, by putting it at the end of the persistent path, we know that it never needs it at the beginning of the file path. That way there's really no room for error. We're going to do a similar check like we did above. Let me go find it. Looking for it. Okay. So we're going to take this if statement right here where we check, this is under set data path, by the way, where we check if the last character is the separator char or the alt separator char. We're going to copy it, and then we're going to go all the way back down to our save to JSON. We will paste this, except instead of checking the last char, we're just going to do the first char. So where it says path.length -1, we're going to change this to 0, and we're going to do that on both sides. So it's going to grab the first character in the path string. And if this is true, meaning that the first character is one of these separator chars, we will just do path equals path.substring 1. So we're skipping the 0 index, which will be the separator character, and then we're including everything after it. Let me go ahead and put comments on that. Remove directory separator character if it exists on the first character. I'm actually going to add another sanity check up at the top now that I think about it. I will do if underscore persistent data path equals string dot empty. Then I'm going to go ahead and return. Again, you should probably be putting errors here. Go ahead and put whatever you want. I'm being lazy at this point. I'm just trying to get this video over quicker for you. So now that we know that the persistent data path exists and so does the path, we can go ahead and try to save. Now let's call write to file result, which is going to be the text as you can see, and then the path is going to be underscore persistent data path plus the path which we would have modified if required, and we're going to leave formatting to true by default. And let's go ahead and add comments at the top of this. Serializes an object and write the text to the path. We'll say to the file at path. We are basically done at this point. Now we just have to go ahead and add some actions for the on-click options here. Under on-click load database, I would do vehicles equals return database of type vehicle, and we have the database name as a constant just for our example. And I'm going to go ahead and close it off and do a print loaded database. And for the save, I will do save to JSON, passing in vehicles and then database name. And I'm going to do print saved database. I'm not sure if it will throw an error if you try to save a null object, so you should probably check for that. Let me go do that real quick because I've never tried. I'm assuming it might actually throw an error though. So if object equals null, then go ahead and, oops, if save object equals null, go ahead and return. All right, I think we're ready to try out this code. Going back to Unity, it's going to compile everything. This is the new script we just made, the database handler. I'm going to get rid of the old JSON thingy script, and I actually have buttons here on this canvas I made up real quick. I just need to reassign those to the on-click actions. My buttons should now function. I just did it off camera. Let's hope this works. First try, crossing fingers. Usually doesn't, but we'll see, right? Let me go up to my JSON thingy. We have no vehicles. Let me add 3. I'm going to expand the elements, going to make this A, and under model AA, B, 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 C, C, C. I'm going to go ahead and hit save, crossing fingers, save database, no errors. That's a good sign. Let me go ahead and zero it out. Now I'm going to hit load, and something went wrong. This is loading the old database, so that tells me that it did not save properly. So let me find out what's going on. Okay, so this is actually an easy fix. I did a check here where if it's not the separator char, either separator char at the beginning, then to remove the first character. When it's actually supposed to check if it's a separator char at the beginning, then go ahead and remove the first character. So just change the doesn't equals to equals, and if you caught that on the way, then kudos to you. Also, I think I am going to add debug here real quick, just because it's bugging me. So debug.log error, save to JSON, object cannot be null, and I'm going to just go ahead and copy this message, and path cannot be empty, and then again one more time. The reason I'm doing this is because I'm like, I wonder if it's in the save to JSON method that's going wrong, and I realized I didn't have any error output here, and I'm like, well, what if it's one of those things that are breaking? And then I felt really stupid. So here I am adding it in. So last check, persistent data path is empty. All right, now we shall try this again. Going to hit play. Again, I'm going to do 2 this time to speed it up. A, B, 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 and save. It says it was saved. I'm going to clear out the array, hit load, and it looks like it is working now. Now I actually have the folder that it's saving to open right here. I'm going to just rename this real quick, put an underscore in the front so it's like the database doesn't exist. I'm also going to make sure I'm going to delete it from my resources too. And now I'm going to go ahead and try and load it. And you see that it's returning empty because it doesn't exist in the resources or the persistent data. So again, this is just to show you and demonstrate that it's working. I'm going to leave this underscore here, but copy it, go to my resources folder where I will paste it in, remove the underscore, and I'm going to open up the file and actually change this first character to a Z from an A, and then close out of the resources. And with that change made, I'm going to hit load again. I see the Z there, so I know it's actually loading from resources. Now let's assume that I have modified the file and I have saved it, which would place it in my persistent data directory. So that's what I just simulated by putting the file back. Now if I go ahead and hit load again, it should go change that Z to an A, which is what's in this file right here, which indicates everything is working. So hopefully everything is good for you. Like always, feel free to comment if you're having any issues, and I'll certainly try to get back to you.